I'm the coordinator of this event. I just wanted to take a few moments to introduce BWOMET. BWOMET is Graduate Women at MIT, and our mission and purpose is for the professional and personal development of graduate women at MIT. During week, we held a lot of events for the BWOMET Leadership Conference that is held in fall every year. And we will have the Spring Empowerment Conference, and there is also mentorship and advocacy events throughout the whole year, so you're welcome to be part of BWOMET. Now, let's welcome Danielle Merkel, our speaker.
Screen changed over. I just want to take a second. I'll introduce myself, but before I do that, here from GE, Tim O'Hara, who's right over here. He's in human resources, and he's going to help. He does a lot of our staffing, so he really is wanting to make sure to understand the best and the brightest out there. So when we come to an event like this, you know, he's really very interested in sort of seeing who we're meeting, and he'll help us with one of the activities that we're doing today. And for those of you guys who don't know Megan Brewster, many of you probably know her because she was one of the founding executive members of the Graduate Women's Association here at MIT. She graduated with a material science PhD a couple years ago, because then she came over to GE. Happy to have her at our Global Research Center in Schenectady. I just want to make sure you know that we have a couple other folks here, and I'll just run through really quickly what we're going to cover through lunch today. And also, I'll just say this is very casual. So if you're thirsty and you want to go get please get up, walk around, do what you need to do. We just want this to be more of a conversation than a lecture. So have fun, get your food. Pretty much everyone already found a seat. I'll start off giving you a little bit of background about myself. And then right away, so I'll be quick about that, we're going to do a team activity, which hopefully you guys will still be able to have lunch and relax, but this should be a fun way for us to get talking about teams. And then I'll get into kind of our view on really how you can succeed in a team environment, and ultimately, as it's titled, you know, build your dream team. So, and just to give you some context on why I'm here to talk about. So, I've been at GE for about 13 years, and just as way of background, I have a PhD in electrical engineering. I went to graduate school at Northwestern University, just outside Chicago. Go Wildcats! So, but it was I've done a lot of different roles at GE, and most of them. I've been on a lot of different teams. My first team, sort of coming out of the graduate sphere, on your own anymore, as you guys. But when I got into my professional career, my first team was, of course, as a researcher, as an engineer and soon after that, I became a lab manager, and then I had a group of technologists that I was leading. And then my next role, I was running a platform of technology. So now I had to interface with many teams working across the space, and my field was the solar technology, solar PV. And then I actually moved over to the GE business, and I ran the solar business for a couple years. And so then I had to interface with business teams, and I had a commercial side, and I had a technology side, and a sales side, and I had to understand how those kind of teams navigated. And now I'm back at the Global Research Center as of August, so I'm 3 months into my latest role with GE. And my role now is running our electrical technologies and systems domain group. And just to give you a background on what that means and how our Global Research Center is organized, just to give you that context. The Research Center is set up sort of like a university. Our domains, we have 6 of them, are sort of like departments. So we have a materials one, we have an electronics or electrical one, we have software, you can sort of get the picture, right? Propulsion technologies. So each of them can range in size. Mine has about 600 people. We're across all 4 of our main global research sites. So I have people here in New York. I have about 60 people in Bangalore, India, about 65 in Shanghai, China, and another 70 in Munich. And I have a lot of folks that we work with at our new tech center in Brazil. So it's a pretty broad team, and electronics, as you can imagine, is pretty prevalent across the GE companies. So we touch every GE business from, you know, when we're making semiconductor component devices that go into power electronic systems or MR systems or CT scanners, to jet engines and locomotive transport, or even gas turbine systems. So we do a lot of wind plant design and solar design as well. So a pretty broad range of impact that we can have on the company. So that's just a little bit of my background from a teaming perspective, to give you that context that I've seen a lot of different successes and hiccups on the road in terms of how teams are formed and how teams kind of manage and develop themselves and how they can be developed in what's kind of optimum. And some research that we'll share with you this afternoon really supports a lot of that practical experience that I've had. And I'll give you one story just to kind of kick it off, because my first experience in my professional career with a team was one that could have had a very, very different outcome. It was a good ending, and I'll tell you that up front because you're not going to realize, I'll tell you that up front because it's not obvious from the very beginning. But when I first got to the research center, I was, as you know, an engineer, came in, I was going to work on a team, and I think it was the second week I was there, I was told by my boss that he was retiring. And and he was really awesome because he was very, paternal, and everybody sort of looked to him as a father figure. He was kind of an old dude who had been around a long time, so he knew the ropes. And when you get hired into a huge organization, that's sort of your lifeline, is the person that hired you. They thought you were good, they wanted to bring you in, and now they're going to leave. Like, that's a little scary. And that wasn't even as scary as then I got a call from his boss, who was, this guy I hardly ever saw because I was so new and he was so important, saying, well, why don't you why don't you think about going after that job? And I was thinking, okay, so obviously GE is full of crazy people, because this doesn't make any sense, because not only was I the only woman in my group, which was not very unusual because I was the only woman in my research group too, but I was the only person under 50. So all of these people were like my dad's age or older, a couple grandpa age ones. And all of them really admired our leader, and he was sort of the head guru of all the lab managers. Peers of his admired him, and now his boss is asking me to consider taking on that role. So of course I said, what, are you crazy? No, thank you. I don't even know where the bathroom is yet. Let me get my feet settled. And then a couple weeks later, he came back to me and said, no, really, like, what do you think? And I was like, are you crazy? You really are crazy. And ultimately, he got me to the point where he said, look, if you're not interested in it, it could be this guy, who I knew from the team, and I had been there now a month, and I was thinking, oh, I don't want to work for that guy. So I was like, fine, I'm probably going to get fired in a couple weeks anyway, because this place is crazy, and they obviously don't have a great leadership team, because they're asking me to do it. But so anyway, I took a gamble, and I said, fine, I'll interview, and I got the job. So now the panic starts, right? Because now I've got to get announced to this team, remember, mostly my dad's age or older people, who have all just been showing me around. I'm the new girl who doesn't know anything, right? And I have this huge opportunity to advance my career and to try to get this group. And ultimately, GE's not crazy. And the whole plan in mind, because I was coming into this semiconductor field with a very different background than most of the people there. I could speak about something that was, wide bandgap semiconductors were very new. It was an important new growth area for GE. It was something that none of these people had experience in, and they needed a spokesperson in the technical realm to really drive it forward. So looking back, it really all made sense to put someone so junior into a role like that, considering the team makeup especially. So at the time, I was terrified, and I didn't realize that there was this great network of people from a peer level, from the HR team, that would help me navigate through this. So at the time, I felt like I was on my own, because I didn't really understand how GE, or frankly any big company, worked. So I worked through this, and I think it was a lot of luck on my part and a lot of training that I got and good support from the GE side. But when I had to they announced this to the team, and I was sitting in the front. Nobody, of course, thought that I was part of the announcement, so I'm looking around the room, and I just see people's faces go white. A couple people, one guy got up and left. A couple people quit that same week, so this is not all roses, right? I mean, there were some people who left because they weren't happy with that choice. And when I was sort of giving my acceptance speech from hell, is what I like to think about it, I had to address the fact that this was a shock to all of us, that this was as much of an opportunity for them as it was for me, because nobody's going to put a junior person in a role and then let them fail. So this is the time we can ask for more budget or a better lab space or another piece of equipment. So I sort of got them thinking how they could make the best of this. And then I also talked about how, in all honesty, they knew that I couldn't do the role the way that my predecessor did, and that this would be more of an opportunity to have some democratic leadership from within. And a couple people loved that. Some folks on the team who had been sort of marginalized by having such a strong leader felt like they could take on a little bit more leadership. So again, a little bit of luck, a little bit of safety net that I didn't realize was there from GE, but my first foray into trying to be a team leader in the company worked out really well, even though it started off hideously. So we grew the team, again, because this was an important area of growth for GE. We grew the team. I think we doubled it within the first year and then doubled it again after another 2 years. And then the team had to split. And after 7 years, I moved on to a new role with a lot of experience. Because as I grew through that role, it was like I was in a different role every year as I was learning and building my own skills. So I think that's enough of my background. Obviously, that first hurdle was one that kind of sticks in my head because of the emotional terror I was going through. But there was a little bit of that every time I stepped into a new role. And it wasn't just being the leader that was the change. It's also being on a new team. I had peers in all of these roles. When I moved to the business, I had to get used to all the business stuff because I was used to being the technical person, and now that wasn't my job anymore. So there was all this other stuff I had to learn. So when we get to this later, I'll talk to you a little bit about how you can best manage and think about your role on the team and what the leader's role is. And whether you're a leader or on the team, there's a lot of things that you can do to help make that transition better. But before we do that, we're going to play a quick little game, and it should be pretty fun, and it should be pretty concise and quick. And let me hand it over to Tim to talk a little bit more about what we're going to do.
Yes. Now we fed. Okay.
Okay, so while we're cleaning up, I just want to make a couple comments. What we just saw from this exercise that Tim led us through. So one of the things that Megan and I were just talking about was common perceptions of the fact that there might be a gender bias in terms of how people behave. And in a room mostly full of women, we still saw a quite diverse set of colors here. So I think this is a lot of what mainstream businesses are waking up to, is that you won't get any one kind of behavior from any one set of employees. So this is really important. Also, just from a personal perspective, I started off blue in my career, and I'm almost completely red now. And part of that shift was because of my environment, what's expected of me in my role, what kind of changed in my life as I grew up and started being a mom, and all this other stuff that changed in my life. So you're not ever stuck in the color, and if you're on the borders of colors, you'll even more easily shift back and forth. So perspective, and we'll get more into why this matters and ultimately how we want to think about teams. So let me walk you through some pieces. Before I start, we want to give thanks to Dr. Susan Whelan. And Tim knows her very well. I guess she has done groundbreaking research in this space, and as a technologist, I think I can appreciate, because what she's done, she focuses on organizational behavior, and she does behavioral analysis. So she puts real statistics behind sort of theory of how teams work, and she does a lot of behavioral analysis. So all the things that we'll have her name at the bottom of the slide, so you can look up her work, and if you're interested in it, you can learn more. But a lot of this is based on her research over decades. So it's really informed by technology and science, and some of this is how things work in a thoughtful way, but it's really based on a lot of work behind the scenes. So let me talk just at a high level real quickly about global teams. And before I get into sort of this creating the work cultures, I want to call out two very important things that we all easily overlook. The first two words up here are global teams. So this, in and of itself, is a very big shift in how people in corporate America think of teams. First of all, we're a lot more global than we ever used to be. This is across not even just corporate, but even small businesses. You're more likely to be on a team where there's a time difference involved between team members. You're definitely going to have a team where there's multicultural backgrounds involved. So this global piece is almost a given. And at your generation, you're probably saying, like, Jan, when is she going to get to something I don't know? So I'll move past that. The team is something that many of you also assume, but really I just want to put this in perspective. For hundreds of years, thousands of years probably is a better way to think about it, even tens of thousands of years, our whole society was based on the ability to be an individual worker, perform an individual task. The Industrial Revolution only heightened that by allowing sort of manufacturing to happen in some assembly line kind of format. Now, all that kind of standard single task type stuff, machines or robots or computers do that stuff. So now, more than any time in human history, the types of jobs that humans do are more complex, more important to kind of the higher level of thinking and learning, and they require multiple capabilities that one person necessarily can't bring to the table. So the idea that you have to focus on teams is now not just an interesting sidebar for your work, it's actually an imperative for how this society and how our economy plays out. So just to put it in perspective, this is a very important central part of your career as you move forward in it. One really physical example at the research center is over the last 13 years that I've been there, we're gradually changing our infrastructure. When I first got there, most of the labs were back from the 50s, and so that was when some of the main buildings were built. And when you walk down the hall, what you see is a lab, and there was a couple desks, but mostly lab equipment. And in the back of the lab was where the PhD's office was, and in the lab was where his technicians sat. And then the next door held another lab, and another office in the back, and so on down a hall. Hundreds of these labs, hundreds of individual scientists and contributors and technologists working in their own lab on their own projects. I can't even imagine that happening at GE today. Those labs are being gutted or have already been gutted. And of course, just like in a university forum, you have shared space. You can't even afford the equipment on your own, much less, put it in one lab with access to only one or two people. So from a resources perspective, from a landscape perspective, everything is better, broader, shared. You have people sitting in more common areas, people having access to each other in a much different way. So the idea of teams has revolutionized how even corporations are doing research and development. I think that's sort of an important backdrop. So the pieces in terms of creating work structure or work cultures falls into kind of three categories. The structure of the team is very important. How decisions are made, who gets to make the call, how many people are on the team. These are all, and I'll get into these in a little bit more detail in the coming slides. Effectiveness is also important. Do you have the right people with the right skills? As we heard before, if you have a bunch of machines that need to be fixed and you've got a bunch of people who mostly like to worry about interpersonal stuff and aren't too mechanically minded or practically minded, that's probably not the right mix for that task. That's not the right team makeup. So effectiveness is going to be a very big consideration. And role of leadership, and we'll be talking about teams, and in your mind you should be playing through what if I'm on the team or what if I'm the leader of the team. You'll be in, even as a leader of a team, you're still a peer to other people on the next level of team. So you got to think about it from a couple different perspectives. And the role of the leader can be very different. Now, it also depends on what stage the team is at, but across GE, you see roles that are very traditional, very hierarchical, where you have a leader and then they've got a team that does sort of on the focus or the drive that the leader has identified. But it's becoming more and more rare. Very, very early stage teams. What happens is the leader is ultimately a part of the team, and then the team communicates without necessarily the leader's involvement. Then you can think about the transition where the leader is apart from the team, and the team sort of is a self-directed entity that the leader sort of watches and engages with at a distance. And then, sometimes you might not even have a leader. The team is purely self-directed. Of course, every team has to only check in infrequently to understand the assessment of the team's progress. So the role of leadership also depends on what kind of stage the team is at in terms of what kind of leader they need. So this is probably some of the core work that Dr. Whelan did, and I'll show you just these are the stages of team development. She has these terms for them. You're starting off at dependency and inclusion, counterdependence and fight, trust and structure, work and productivity. Some of you might be more familiar with some of the early work done by Bruce Tuckman, and he named these four: forming, storming, norming, and performing. Has anyone heard of those four things before? Yeah, so his work was done decades before Susan's, but what she did was she actually put together a framework for assessing and quantifying and measuring which stage a team was at. She's actually got some of the only statistically minded data that actually can tell you by answering this long questionnaire of 60 questions or so, which stage your team is at. So she really validated it. And she also gave her own names, although I think forming, storming, norming, and performing is much easier to remember. She really wanted to sort of clarify what that meant to be at each stage. And let me just walk you through. I'm not going to read all this, so don't be intimidated by all the text, but just to give you a sense of what this means. For those of you who aren't so familiar with the Tuckman's theory here. So, forming. So this is when you first get a team. And, you can think of your research team. You can think of a sports team. If you've been involved in sports, you can pretty much pick anything. But imagine something right now. And imagine when you were first involved in that. Everybody's nice to each other, very polite. A little bit of confusion about who's doing what, but that's okay because we're all just going to work together. And I know we did a mom's soccer group, which was just sad all around. But I won't get into that part because none of us should have been playing soccer at that stage in our lives. But we're all very nice to each other, and we were trying to figure out where we were going to play, and we had to be goalie that week, and it was all very nice, and nobody fought. But then, before too long, we moved into this storming phase, which we didn't realize at the time, but it's a necessary stage every team will go through. And during the storming phase, you kind of get a little anxious. There's some conflict. Some people are dissatisfied with how things are going. She's not really good at defense, but I don't really want her up front with me on offense. I don't want to play goalie again. I just did it last time. So, from a team member perspective, people are getting impatient. They're a lot less friendly and nice. There's some confrontation. Very important, but very uncomfortable phase of team development. hopefully teams move beyond that and move into the norming or trust and structure phase, which is really about sort of sorting out who does what, a little bit more faith in each other. Okay, well, she's really not that good at this, but she really was great in terms of getting the team excited, so let's bring her back. She can be on the defense over here. Ultimately, everybody sort of figured out, even though we have a diverse set of skills, who has what role on the team, start to accept each other. We started cooperating a lot better. And then we never got to this phase, frankly, because this is where we'd be winning all our games, and we never really did. But ultimately, when you get into a groove and the team understands each other and everybody's got their own role to play, it's like heaven, really. I mean, if you've ever been on a high-performing team, you know it, because you remember that feeling that you got when you were working with that team, and you felt a little bit invincible. You felt more could have been on your own, and you really wanted to conform with this team, and you wanted to think about where you could take this team next. What could you do with this team? Could you take it into this new realm because you were superstars, right? I mean, you had this invincible feeling, and this team could do anything. So I'll say one thing just about sort of mapping out your life. People who work in jobs and they hate their jobs and they go to work every day are probably here, just so you know. And people who are like transformed by their life and their career is so much a part of what they do are probably living in a team environment that feels a lot more like this. And as we all search for sort of fulfillment and happiness in what we do, some of that is making the world a better place and fulfilling our own individual needs for impact and society and bringing home the bacon, whatever it is that you want to get out of your life. But it's always much more pleasant and much more fulfilling if you're in a team that reaches that stage. Did you have a question?
Yes. Is there like a time frame for each
Yes,
stage?
absolutely. And I'll walk through that in a minute. Let me give you a couple more points to consider here, because I think this is really interesting. I won't leave this slide up forever, but some of the work, and Tim was really great to give me some background on this because he's heard from Susan a lot of times and he's worked closely with her, but she had some interesting learnings from working with a lot of different teams in these spaces. And there are some teams who are more likely to get stuck in here, and I've been a part of volunteer groups, and Tim has as well. He runs a fire company, he works in a fire company, and I've been on the board of directors for our Girl Scout Council in the Northeast here. And in volunteer organizations, very typically, if not really driven well, can really get stuck in this storming phase. If you've ever been involved in a volunteer organization, you can imagine that people turn over, you don't really have much stability of the team, you don't really have a chance to get through this. Another organization that typically gets stuck here are academics, surprisingly, who maybe also have some of that same turnover or have lack of sort of a strong focus as a team to move forward. And really interesting and kind of scary was some really good statistical work that Susan did where she mapped the stage that a group of ICU nurses, so think of a team on a ward of nurses, at which stage they were at as a team and the survivability of the patients in the ward. So you can imagine you would want to be with those nurses that really knew how to work together as a team and they have each other's back and they all are in the right roles. If they're kind of, having problems, impatient, not sure who does what, not sure what the leader's up to, then you definitely want to get better fast and go to a different hospital. So, I mean, this really is very profound in terms of just having the statistical backing to understand what it means to be a... Now, I think it's really important to consider stages of what you're at and how much time it takes to go through that. We'll definitely get to that in a minute. But before we do that, let me just talk about effectiveness. So there's a bunch of things to consider about how can your team be effective. And these are just some of the high-level ones. So timeliness. So as I'm going to show you in a minute, it takes a certain amount of time to get through these stages. And we'll show you sort of the minimum time. But just to cut to the chase, it's probably going to take about a year or a little more at a minimum to move through these stages. Now, if you have a project that needs to get done in a much shorter time than that, you've got to consider you might not already be a high-performing team before your deadline is happening. So take these things into consideration and look for, and I'll just jump down here, maybe you've got a team at the ready. Maybe there's already a group of people who have been working together or a group of people who have a better understanding of how teams work. Maybe they sat through some training like this and they get a little bit of sense of how to move through these stages more effectively. But those are the kind of things you have to consider if you've got a deadline and the timing will be tight. Size. There is going to be a limit to how fast your team can move based on how big it is. Probably the optimum is 8 to 10 people. And you want not 2 or 3 because you get a better breadth and sort of diversity of resource when you have that more people. But when you get above 12, 15, forget it. It's just going to be really hard to get that many people sort of focused on a mission and really passed a lot of the interpersonal stuff quickly. Teams at the ready, I sort of commented on already. People who have already been effective teams, think of them as a resource, as a unit, rather than as individual people who have moved forward in terms of this progression. And then members with the skills to do the job. Sort of back to the point. You've got to bring on people not only that work well together, but to have the resources and the effectiveness to do the job that that team needs to bring together. At the Research Center, we are, probably the most industrial labs left in the world. And, we're about 2,000 PhDs working across several global sites. And what I think sets us apart from the rest of the world is that we have a very team, and we know how to resource projects. People who knew how to design equipment. 3 years, we pulled together this, walk us through these stages. And this year, we have broken every record, and we have the world's best, highest efficiency, lowest cost thin film solar. I think having the training and having this understanding sort of as a base understanding across all the leadership and project leaders is a key part to the success for programs like that. Member stability is a big one. So I guess a rule of thumb is if you have up to 50% of your members freshen up, like new, maybe they roll off and new people come on, you start back at square one. Now you might be able to absorb a couple new members on the team and still be moving through those stages as you get to a critical mass. No matter how good the rest of that team is, you've still got to start to absorb the new people and bring them through that process. So you don't want to start a team with high turnover halfway through. You're going to have to start over. And then lastly, task interdependence. So I mentioned how you want to have 8 to 10 at least to really get that breadth of resource. It's really important for those many people, and it's important for everybody to have a role. Just like when you're on a team and there's somebody that sits the bench all the time. Not only are you missing out on that person's adding to the capabilities of the team, you're actually weakening the team by not getting resources and from every different angle that you can. There's got to be some skill that that person can bring to the team. And if everybody has an individual stovepipe of activity, one person goes away and you've lost a key activity. There's got to be a little overlap. There's got to be interdependence. The whole team moves together through these stages and these processes. So real quickly, team effectiveness, you need a lot of things. And I won't leave this slide up long because it's all about resources. And let me show you instead a slide that Tim put together, which is really good, because if you're building a team, this is what you're building. You've got a leader supporting this team who says, okay, here's the mission statement. The team figures out their ground rules. They have meetings. Everyone's got roles and responsibilities. They need to measure progress. They need to make decisions. And then they kind of renew the team, right, if there's a new task or if they need to take on another challenge. But if you just have that, that's likely to be successful, because what you need to be successful are these resources that are from development. So you need the team to have a good understanding of what teams look like, how they work, like what we're talking about today. You need to have somebody on the team teach them or know how to run a team meeting. Somebody's got to take notes. There's got to be action items. Somebody's got to distribute what happened and who needs to do what. You've got to have a little bit of an understanding of a how-to. How is this team going to communicate? Are we going to have a web board? Are we going to use some of our new tools? Are we going to write emails back and forth? Are we only going to do stand-up meetings 8 o'clock every day? I mean, somebody has to have a good understanding of what communication is going to work for this team and educate the team on the different opportunities. It's always good to have a referee around for conflict management. It's good to have coaches. I mean, when you go to a big company like GE, you can get a lot of these resources provided by staff. And then you want to have somebody who understands how to facilitate problem solving. So you can have a team that you build, but without the resources to make it effective, get through the hard spots, use the tools that make everything easier, it's just less likely to be successful. So these resources are critical. And then, of course, you have a high-performing team. One thing I thought when I first heard this, I really did discount it. Maybe some of you have already heard of this. This is also work that was done by, I can't remember the guy's name now. Dave Ulrich, right. So this was by me 20 years ago. Work in University of Michigan. Okay. So he did a lot of work on how do you, what's one of the biggest issues in a team? And this happens a lot in the storming phase, that second phase. But one thing that you can do, this is a tool, by the way, a tool that you can use to get through a lot of those issues is, it's called the GRIPPY model, or the GRIPPY. So when I first heard this, tee-hee-hee, that sounds goofy. It really didn't seem like anyone at GE, which is a really pretty buttoned-up place, when I first got there, I thought so, that they would want to use something that sounded so silly, and it's got a lot of touchy-feely components. The GRIPPY is goals, roles, processes, and interpersonal. So the idea of this tool is that if you have a new team, no matter how much they know each other, no matter whatever, they get together. Okay, are we clear? What are we going to do here as a team? What's our assignment? What is our goal? What's the mission here? Even though 90% of them already know it, they still get together and talk about it. They make it very clear, and usually there's some disagreement or discussion, which is useful and practical. Surprisingly, in that one. Roles, this is always very clear. Who's going to do what? Everybody on the team needs to figure it out, and maybe they don't know right away, but maybe they just have to define the roles and then just figure out who gets assigned what. Processes. So, ultimately, there's a lot of things you can do to approach the goal as a project, but also how do you run your team? And there's a lot of different processes that you can use. So the team needs to decide which processes are we going to use? How do we want to run our meetings? How are we going to hand out action items? Who's going to make certain decisions on our team? Are we always going to make decisions by consensus? These are important decisions that the team needs to understand going in. And then lastly, interpersonal. Does everybody on the team know each other but this guy over here? Does everybody not know this person because they're new or because they work in a completely different field? Does everybody know what people's backgrounds are and skills they're bringing to the team? Interestingly, the interpersonal side, which is what I thought would be really hard to have a conversation about with a bunch of engineers, is probably the other. The most interesting things I found is that even at a company that you would think of as like a Fortune 50 company that has all this, focus on project execution and activity, that they would rely on such a goofy sounding tool. This is probably one of the most effective tools I've ever used as a team member or as a team leader to get everybody on track. And if you want to get past that storming phase, whether you're a volunteer organization or if you're a nurse, God, hopefully do this, like this helps you get past it quickly. So I just wanted to share that. So back to your question. Where did she go? She left. Dang it. Oh, shoot. Tell her. Whoever's sitting here, somebody find her and tell her. She was asking, what's the time frame to get through those stages? So if you start at here, like at first, that first stage of just the forming the team takes a couple months. That's just everybody still being polite. Remember that stage? Then you think, okay, now everybody starts to get a little less polite. They get real, right? And a little bit mean, maybe. But that's that storming part. 3.5 months of that. And this is if you're doing it right. This is not like worst case scenario. And then trust and structure or the team is 5 months, and the last where you really are productive is at least 6 months to get there. Now, it's important because this is the most optimistic timing. And like I said earlier, it's about a year at the minimum, a little more than a year actually. So this isn't trivial. It's interesting because when I think about these platoons of guys who go through training, and then they are a team, they're a unit, they live together, work together, and they go out and have different missions and different activities, but they don't change their team, right? Because they don't reinvest in building this kind of infrastructure over and over and over when they have mission-critical, time-critical activities to perform. So you can think about organizations now, it kind of hits you, that do this naturally, keep this time frame from having to continue to reinvent itself, right? They build a team. Yes? Well, so like I mentioned before, it depends on how many new people come onto the team. So if the team is pretty constant size and you get a flood of new people coming on, let's say you have to grow your team, as happens a lot when you're successful in industrial research, you now have to do more of it, or you have to have some of the team members go help the business scale it up. If you have more than 50, let's say you have a 12-person team and 6 more people come on, you're starting over. Now, hopefully, all those people that were on the team that went through this process realized what process was they were going through, and maybe they got tools like the GRIPPY one, how to get through this one really fast, and they can speed it up, or they can really try to minimize the time spent in each of these to quickly get to that really productive, well-oiled machine kind of feel. But typically, yeah, you kind of go through the process again, which is why when we're planning scale-up of successful things, it's really important to plan for the team dynamics as well as the equipment to come in and the new funding to join and all the basics that we always think of. This is one that's overlooked even on successful teams that need to grow, but it shouldn't be. And then, one thing I want to comment on here, so you really want to be able to assess where your team is, whether you're on the team or whether you're leading the team. And ultimately, if you've got a pre-existing team, and you're just taking on a new task, you might not have to worry about this. But the last piece here is there are strategies as a leader to help you move through these. And let me just walk you through this because we haven't really talked about leader, but from a leadership perspective, or first of all, you have to know who the leader is, right? It has to be clearly defined, especially for early stage groups. And there's a lot of different leadership styles, as I just mentioned, depending on what stage you're in. And it doesn't mean you need a new leader for each stage. It just means the leader has to conform to whatever is needed from the leader. So let's take a look at what they are. So you're a leader now. What do you do as your team goes through these 4 stages? So when the team is forming, the leader should really help define the direction, give people roles, provide context for everything, try to reduce the anxiety. And these are some of the tools that the team leader can use, right? There's icebreakers. You can get people to know each other, set some ground rules, set the agenda. When the team starts storming, get out of the room. No, I'm kidding. Then the team leader has to focus on how to resolve some of that conflict. How do you focus on what are the common goals? Let's get everybody on the same page. Grippy, I can't say it enough, is probably the best tool for this stage. So the leader has to really say, okay, people, let's get in a room and let's hash this out. And it can be, conflict is never very fun. Yes, question?
So during the storming stage, do people get fired and people quit?
The only reason why people would get fired is if they're inappropriate or unsafe. So like if somebody came to a meeting and they're storming and they're saying, you guys all suck, I want to kill you. Yeah, they're going to get fired. But typically that's not what happens. Typically, people are politely rude, right? Or the conflict is about, I don't trust your work, that kind of thing. It's not so much that people are calling each other names or threatening or things like that. Although I can imagine if you don't have a very civil workplace environment, it can get pretty bad. But most professional workplace environments are very civil and professional. So it would never come to that. But I guess as I talk about it, it sounds pretty extreme, but I want you to take it seriously. It is kind of extreme. People might not express their anger or their frustration, but they go home and they have a sick feeling in their stomach, or they complain to their spouse, or they don't feel like coming in the next day. And that's important to know, and it's important to understand that's what's going on in your team members' heads. So nobody that I know of has ever gotten fired being in the storming phase, but you never know. So the next one is norming. So this, as a leader, you really want to help people plan, like who's the best, what role should people have? This is where people start to get really fixed. What you do for the team really starts to get settled. And ultimately there's a thing called stakeholder analysis, which is what do people expect to get out of our team? Where you really, the leader can sort of drive, let's talk about this common goal. This is what this stakeholder needs from us. And then lastly, when the team is really, really performing well and everybody's jiving and excited about what they're doing, hands off. Let them work. Get out of the way a little bit and encourage that independence and encourage that self-confidence that the team has built. And some of the tools here are just observing and apply some knowledge, tweak things as you go. And one of the most important things that I think a lot of leaders need to pay attention to is this last one here. So leaders sometimes feel like they're being evaluated on how strong of a leadership role they play. If the team can get up and present the work and provide the context and wow the customer, all that stuff without the team leader needing to be present, that is a win for the team leader. Not every team leader feels that. They might want to be standing at the front of the room, hearing the applause, feeling the pats on the back, but that's not actually what the team leader is best going to be, that's not best for the team necessarily. So as much as the team leader might feel proud of all this, they don't necessarily need to get all the attention for it. So whether you are the leader or whether you're on a team, remember that the team being successful is the leader's success. And I think, one of the things that Tim can comment on greatly is the way that people are evaluated at a company like GE is absolutely with this in mind. If you're a leader of a team and the team is very successful, you will absolutely get credit for leading that team. And that means getting credit when you're in the background too. So it's important to understand how you're being evaluated and how you're being developed. And as you move into different corporate environments or different research environments, whether it's academia, government labs, industrial research, everybody's kind of got a way that every business has a culture of how they look at this. So make sure you understand the one that you're into so you can apply your skills well. And then, of course, you want to recognize and celebrate achievement along the path, because everybody wants to know they're moving forward, right? So yay, we're not fighting this week. Ooh, And then, okay, so just in summary, so this kind of pulls it all together. We talked about a lot of this already, so I'm just going to kind of bring it together, and then we can open it up for questions and dialogue. But you want to understand who's on your team. That fun game that we played where we saw how colorful we were, it was very interesting to see we had such a broad dynamic here across what, some people would say, graduate students at MIT, oh yeah, they're this kind of person. Obviously they're not, right? And just like, have you heard about the, I think my favorite new nutritional advice is eat the rainbow. Have you guys heard this, right? So you want to eat the rainbow because you get all your vitamins, and if it's not a color of a rainbow, it's probably not that great for you if it's not a color you find in nature, right? So like your team should be a rainbow, and if you don't have a yellow, you maybe aren't going to have a very innovative team. If you don't have a blue, you might not ever get anything done. If you don't have a green, you won't get it done on time. And if you don't have a yellow, nobody will have fun doing it. Like, you really do need these different colors to make a team cohesive and practical and useful. So make sure you eat the rainbow, but then also make sure you're on a team that has a rainbow, and you might need to go out and bring someone onto your team if you're missing a color. Or if you're the team leader, develop a team that has not just the right skills, because that's important too, but the right interpersonal and sort of color dynamic here. I also have talked a lot about these stages, and that's Dr. Susan Wheeler's most important work is in this recognizing what stage you're in, because that's the first step. And that's a lot of what her questionnaire that she developed was for. It was a very statistical way to figure out what stage you're in. Once you know that, you can do something, right? You can take these strategies and move forward so you can get to that Shangri-La. And then clarify the GRIPPY, the goals, roles, processes, and interpersonal. That really helps. You can even do that at later stages too, just to remind everybody if you feel like anybody's slipping back. And at the last part here is take ownership for the team's success. This is not just a leader. As the leader of the team, you want to, of course, feel ownership for the team's success. But on the team, you're responsible for the team too. And this is something that, you know, I think that the whole basis of what you guys are putting on here this week in terms of the leadership event is take charge, right? So as you are on a team or as you're leading the team, feel like it's your team. You can be responsible for the success by applying the strategies you learned here today, by learning more about this kind of work so that those teams that you were inevitably going to be on, every stage of your career, you can be the person that makes it work. You can be the person who educates some team members about a tool you could use, or you could be the leader who decides we need to bring in this type of person, or we need to get past the storming phase. So, you know, own it. And if you need to learn more, there's always good resources. And this is, I think, something that hopefully you'll take away from here is that you're not just on a ship and it's going across the ocean and you're waiting for it to get there. You are driving the ship. You have on the team, you're a part of making it move. I think that's it. Do we want to talk about the book?
Yeah, so why don't we do that?
Yeah, go ahead. And then we'll take questions. Just wanted to make a quick announcement.
How about others? Everybody have one? Everybody's got one? Okay, so take a look on the back. Take a look on the back, and if you have a yellow sticker on the back, you just want a copy of Susan's book. So if you have a yellow sticker, raise your hand.
And so we're very appreciative to her for letting us use a lot of her work. So
her office is in Cape Cod, and she goes, tell everybody I could use the work.
Right. Okay, so while the book's now keep your hand up so you can get your book. You guys had a good time, but let me take some questions if you guys had any questions as we were going through it. Hopefully you asked them along the way too. Any questions? Yeah, Jennifer.
I find an ongoing challenge on any team is communication. So how can you encourage proactive communication? Other than asking for it, other than saying you're not responding to my emails,
One of the, and this is just my own personal experience, I was on a team that had a pretty big deadline, and the team was having trouble getting all of the members, and we didn't want to have to work on consensus, but we knew the more people that were on board, the better, and we did have to make decisions that were based on each member, each sort of sub-team bringing some answer, right, so we could make the next decision in terms of a decision tree kind of thing. So what we instituted was 8:15 stand-up meeting every day in the same room that only lasted 15 minutes, but effectively we were going to make a decision at the meeting. And every day, everybody had to come and talk. And ultimately, those people who weren't really good at emailing the findings of their work that day, they could get a question asked to them, right? So it could get pulled out of them. And if you didn't show up that day and a decision was made that wasn't based on your input, it was your fault. Like, it was clearly in somebody's wheelhouse that they should have been there to say, this is what we learned yesterday and now we need to make a left instead of a right. So that personal responsibility was sort of foisted on them by requiring everyone to meet for 15 minutes every day at a certain time. And after a while, we sort of were able to bleed off of having that meeting. We made it every other day, then we made it once a week, and then sort of the discussions kept happening. But sometimes you just have to sort of stimulate that conversation in a different way. And maybe it's not always the personal stand-up. Like, canvas. And ultimately, this is good for global teams because they can post something and everybody sees it. And if you don't respond, everybody knows you got it. So why didn't you have an input? You know, so we're trying different ways using.
In the norming stage, you mentioned the fact that you sort of as a
of the colors. It can also be based on their passions, because like for example, we've been on projects where they needed somebody and move forward, but this person didn't really want to work on something that was so business critical, something that was sort of more blue sky. It was still practical and it was still forward thinking, but they wanted to work on the earlier stage work, and this is in a solar place, so they wanted to try out the new materials rather than making the material that we had work more effectively. So that was just sort of giving them a role on the team that kind of was in their sort of passion area. But in terms of people in these colors, Tim, do you want to comment?
Just to add to that, what she said, I think this helps you understand how to approach people on your team. So if you're going to approach a blue person, what are you going to do?
yeah.
What do you do? Yeah, what would you do if you had to have a meeting with a blue person? What would be important for you to succeed with that person? You bring them the what? Facts and figures, right? If you're going to meet with a green person, what do you want to make sure you're on
Timeline.
time, right? So it's more of helping you understand how to approach and adapt your style. If you're someone over here and you're going to meet with someone over here, think about their style. How can I be effective and read them? And then on the norming side, as Danielle said, I think it's more around tasks and ownership within the team to help the team grow into the next stage.
Good. Yes.
So I'm about to graduate soon.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But I'm in the where I'm going to interview, so I have a very short time span to like meet different teams. What good flags or red flags? You know, do you have any advice for?
You know, you can be pretty straightforward and just ask, you know, tell me about the team you're on, because everybody's on a team, right? You can say, tell me about a team you're on, or you can ask if it's going to be somebody you think will be a superior in the role. Tell me about the team you lead, and I mean, you can sort of think about how they talk about that team, what kind of things they tell you. Do they talk about the people like they know them very well? Do they just sort of talk about them? You can sort of get what level they start giving you information about as to how maybe close-knit that team is. And you can even say, how long has the team been together? That'll give you a clue a little bit as to where they might be just in the time frame. Or, you know, does the team have a lot of turnover? How easy will it be for me to fit into this team, you know, if it's a team you're considering joining? Don't be shy about asking about the team, and you'll get a sense of that leader's style, or if it's a peer on the team. You know, when was the last new person joined the team? How did they fit in? What do you guys think about me joining the team? Is there, you know, I mean, just, you'll be surprised at how open people are. And as much as companies will try to sell you on their company when you're visiting, because they obviously are bringing you in because they want you to come work there, they don't want you to work at a place that isn't what it is, right? They want it to be a good fit. So as much as possible, the peers and the leaders that you'll be meeting with will be telling you what it's really about. So you just have to make sure.
Do you have any questions? Yeah, you use Grippy, and what's the Tuckman's?
Yeah, maybe don't go there, unless it's an HR week, and then you'll get extra points. Yeah.
You guys know.
You had a question in the back?
Yeah, I was wondering how much of the team's success in getting from performing to performing is attributed to the leader versus attributed to the members?
Well, I'll tell you this, and you might want to add to this too. I think the leader can help move the team through quicker. And without a leader, you're probably going to have a much harder time unless you have some real grassroots leadership, which means the leader isn't really the leader anymore, and there becomes a leader from within. So having a leader, whether it's the organized formal leader that was said at the beginning, or whether it's a natural progression of leadership that grows from within, is probably very critical to get through this. Because you really need someone to coach and to shove and to nurture and nudge sort of to that right. You want to just get people past it. And some of this is hard to do when you're not in a position to kind of give advice or give guidance or resources. Do you want to add anything?
You know, as a leader, what do you want to do? Get the resources and knock down the barriers so the team can be successful. And to Danielle's point, coach, encourage, but the team really has to do the work. Mm-hmm. It's really up to the members to develop that level of trust and interdependence that is needed to move to that fourth stage. That's where you want to be. It's more fun. I've been on teams that have been in the fourth stage. We've all been on teams that are in the second stage.
I thought was just interesting, I'll add. Besides, you know how I mentioned the military, how the military sort of develops people and keeps them together? Have you ever heard stories of like these really, really good business executives who move to a new company or join another part of the business and they bring their team with them? It's not just because these are friends or because they love their assistant or because their vice president of this was really cool. It's because that's what made them effective, right? So they're bringing their troop, they're bringing their team. Did you have a question? Yeah.
Yes. Could you explain more which color should work together
So this-
in each stage?
Yeah, so it's not so much like a zodiac where, you know, Leo, stay away from Libra kind of thing. It really is about the fact that as a yellow, you should know how to work the green and the blue. And if you don't, you can learn a little bit more by understanding. Ultimately, there's really no these two work best. I mean, oh, the yellows worry about the greens. Only because what your tendency to do is maybe opposite of what their tendency is. But people understand human nature varies, right? And at this stage in our sort of development as a society, nobody expects you to have the same objectives in life and ways to approach life that they do. I think the important thing here isn't so much to say at what stage which colors work best or which colors work well together. It's more to say the more knowledgeable you are about the fact that there are different colors and that you're welcoming and you know you need all those colors to work, you can start to knit that team together more tightly and quickly. I'm not sure if that really answered your question, but I don't know that there is an answer in terms of stage and color. Yes? Sure. So, yeah, okay. So my transition from blue, and you know, of course, as a new leader, I really wanted to like make progress. I wanted to measure the progress. I wanted to show people the progress, and it was all about showing that we could be an effective lab. And we were developing a new technology, and then we were actually developing a new solar technology that we were going to try to build a business around. And then when I moved into the business leadership stage, I had to figure out how to get people excited about solar. I needed to have funding. I needed to spend a lot more money on research. I needed to get customers excited about what we were doing. And I found myself sort of selling passion, selling, you know, the idea of what this could be. Because to some degree, the technology at the time was very different from other technologies. It had to have, you know, we are GE, but that doesn't mean people automatically trust everything we do is going to be perfect. So we had to showcase that. So I was more of a technology sales mode. And it was more about connecting with people and getting them excited about what we were doing so that we could move and be successful and showcase what we were doing. So a little bit of the job required me to do it, but I also found I started to like that more. And now in my new role, I'm trying to knit together my team across 4 continents and, you know, 600 people that all want to do different things. I'm trying to sort of find the common strategy and tell the story in a common way. So I'm seeing myself still in that yellow realm. You had a question over here?
Yes, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more.
Team and you're the leader, they come to you and they have grievances against each other.
Right.
And then it ends up being like you're like a kindergarten teacher where you're like, okay, everyone's on fight. But then is it should you let them fight?
Well, so that's a really, because, you know, if you don't ever let the team storm, then you're going to be in that forming stage forever. And you'll never get past the storm. It'll always be like on the horizon, waiting to come, and you're holding it back, you know. So it's very important as a leader, and you will feel like the kindergarten teacher trying to break up the fights. But what you can do, and especially with the tools like Grippy, which I've talked about times, is instead of just having the kindergartners go sit in their chair and think about what they've done, you have them sit at the table and talk about how they feel and what they need. And ultimately, there is a practical issue that they're rebelling against, right? It's their work styles are different, or this person doesn't think that person is doing enough. Well, maybe this person needs to realize what that person's role is and what they're supposed to be bringing to the team. Or, you know, there's some issue on that GRPI that isn't resolved. So from a leadership role, it's definitely not sort of punish the kids or make them feel like this is something they shouldn't be feeling. It's about figuring out what is the root of it and exposing it to the light of day and moving on.
Number of strategies, you know, so just real quick, number of strategies, have the team, pull the team together and say, what's going on? You know, I'm hearing individually from all of you, let's get it all out on the table today. You know, doing team building together so they can all begin to trust and rely on each other. And as Danielle said, get into Grippy and get people focused on a mission. And so they're, you know, going through and deciding who's going to do what, doing a decision matrix, who gets to decide what and when is also helpful. So a number of strategies. Right.
We have time for one more question before I want to remind you guys to fill out the survey. And we want to thank General Electric for your sponsor.
Great.
And we want to thank Tim and Danielle for
Thank
coming
you very
here.
much. Appreciate it.
You have a-
Thank you. Thank you.
And Mayor, for
Hey,
coming
you get
back.
half of this.
For coming back, he was a UWA member.
Yay. Thank you. Okay, so that was time for one more question, if there is another question, and then you can do the, okay, yes.
You've talked a lot about leadership, but there are situations where a team leader has authority over their team. And so can you comment on worrying about, your visibility as, not only are you team leader, but you are also boss, and like playing favorites, and how close or far should you be from your team?
Yeah, that's a good point, because I'll tell you, especially when I moved into that role where all the grandpas were working for me, it was really hard because they were teaching me. They were my mentors. Literally, one was a mentor and one was called my buddy. He was showing me where the bathrooms were, and he was telling me how to develop my career. And by the end of that year, I was giving them their career assessment. I was giving them their rating. So it was just really weird. But I would say in any case, when you have a leadership role and you've got subordinates, if you're thinking very hierarchical, because we've sort of moved into a different generation of leaders, right? You want to know about your people. You want to know, oh, his wife's pregnant. Oh, their kid's soccer is on this great soccer league, and you want to know about their lives because you want to connect with them. But if you have a really strong personal relationship with one or two and not with the rest, it can be a divisive issue on the team. So I think that's the balance that leaders need to strike these days, is to be accessible to all, open to everyone. Some people like to share more private things about their lives, and you will feel like you know more about some people than others, but you just have to make sure that it doesn't get too out of whack. You can know more about this person because they talk all the time about their family. This person might be more quiet, but you can't be that person's godparents of their child and not know where this person lives. You just have to kind of keep it at a little bit more of a balance. It will never be equal, and that's okay.
I think that's our signal.
Yeah, now the lights are going back off.
The MIT guys are at work.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I really appreciated talking to you guys and hearing your great questions.